Did you know most nutrition studies can't even be replicated? The science guiding your food choices is built on bias, statistical tricks, and industry money. Today, I'll show you why nutrition research is broken and what you can trust instead. Hey everyone, my name's Mark Bates. I'm a metabolic health coach, and this is my video on why nutrition science cannot provide reliable guidance. Okay? Every human carries a unique genetic code capable of producing millions of different observable traits. This biological reality makes controlled nutrition experiments virtually impossible to conduct. Even genetically identical twins express different physiological responses to the same foods. Their gene expression shifts based on environment, lifestyle, and nutrition itself. Perfect nutritional research would require separating identical twins at birth and controlling every variable throughout their entire lives. Such experiments remain ethically and practically impossible. Yet nutrition studies publish daily making definitive causal claims about foods and health outcomes. The gap between what researchers can actually prove and what they claim reveals fundamental problems corrupting the entire field. So there's the statistical fabrication problem. When researchers cannot establish true causation, they rely on statistical adjustments to create the appearance of scientific certainty. Multivariate regression techniques attempt to correct observational data by controlling for confounding variables like age, smoking, and physical activity. These adjustments often produce results that directly contradict the raw data. In some cases, statistical manipulation can completely flip research findings. Consider studies examining vegan diets and mortality rates. Raw observational data showed vegans had higher mortality rates than any other dietary groups. After statistical adjustments, the same data suddenly showed vegans had the lowest death rates. This phenomenon represents what researchers call fabrication of data. The adjusted estimates reflect what scientists think should have happened under ideal conditions, not what actually occurred. Similar statistical manipulation affects studies on processed meat and diabetes risk. Raw data often shows weak or neutral associations. After extensive multivariate regression adjustments, the same data suggests strong disease risk. Red meat studies follow the same pattern. Unadjusted data frequently shows no significant cardiovascular associations. Statistical corrections then generate recommendations to reduce consumption despite inconclusive evidence. Then you have the industry influence network. Industry funding creates systematic bias throughout nutrition research. Industry-funded studies are 55% more likely to conclude that food products have health benefits compared to independent research. This influence operates through sophisticated institutional networks extending far beyond obvious food company sponsorship. Organizations like the International Life Sciences Institute function as industry front groups while maintaining the appearance of independent science. Government agencies maintain formal partnerships with food companies that create conflicts of interest in guideline development. The USDA's dietary guidelines office works directly with numerous industry partners. Academic institutions depend heavily on corporate funding for research, conferences, and continuing education. This financial dependence shapes research priorities and interpretation of results. Professional dietetic associations receive substantial funding from major food corporations. This influence suppresses dissenting views and promotes guidelines aligned with commercial interests. Scientific journals preferentially publish industry-sponsored research, creating a publication bias that shapes the entire evidence base used for dietary recommendations. And then peer review suppression system. Right? So researchers attempting to challenge established nutritional paradigms face systematic suppression through multiple mechanisms. Peer review processes subject contradictory findings to harsher scrutiny and often reject them without clear justification. Scientists publishing controversial results struggle to secure funding for future research. Grant agencies and industry sponsors prefer projects aligned with mainstream views. Career advancement suffers when researchers challenge accepted dietary wisdom. Tenure decisions and professional opportunities diminish for those questioning established guidelines. Published dissenting studies face selective citation practices, systematic reviews, and meta analysis exclude or downplay contradictory evidence, preserving preferred narratives. Media campaigns funded by industry interests actively discredit researchers personally rather than addressing their scientific findings. This public denigration deters other scientists from pursuing similar work. So you then have a replication crisis reality. Nutrition science faces what researchers describe as an existential crisis due to widespread failure to replicate previous findings. Scientists routinely cannot obtain the same results that previous investigators reported. The majority of human nutrition research relies on observational designs with tiny effect sizes and massive confounding among variables. These represent largely unfixable problems that severely limit the usefulness of nutritional research. Almost every single nutrient has been associated with almost any health outcome in peer-reviewed publications. This pattern suggests systematic methodological failures rather than genuine scientific discovery. Confounding variables make isolating dietary effects nearly impossible. Socioeconomic status, exercise habits and stress levels, sleep patterns, and healthcare access all correlate with food choices in ways that statistical adjustment cannot adequately address. Even extensive statistical correction cannot solve these fundamental problems. Variables remain so densely correlated that apparent dietary associations may actually result from completely different factors. Then there's a relative risk deception. Media reporting systematically misleads the public by emphasizing relative risk increases while ignoring absolute risk levels. A study might report a 30% relative risk increase that actually represents a change from 0.1% to 0.13% absolute risk. The lay press, patients, and many physicians confuse these terms. Headlines emphasize the dramatic 30% figure rather than acknowledging that both dietary patterns show extremely low disease rates. This reporting bias creates public fear about foods that pose minimal actual risk. The mathematical manipulation serves industry and media interests by generating attention and supporting preferred narratives. Researchers understand this distinction but continue using relative risk reporting because it makes their findings appear much more significant and actionable. Then there's the methodological impossibility. Human biology complexity creates insurmountable barriers to reliable nutrition research. Genetic variations produce vastly different responses to identical dietary interventions among study participants. Phenotype expression changes dynamically based on environmental factors, lifestyle choices, and nutritional intake itself. Even controlling for genetics cannot account for these variable expressions. Behavior factors, including diet adherence, physical activity, stress management, and sleep quality, interact with genetic and phenotype factors in ways that cannot be measured or controlled accurately. Randomized controlled trials assume hypothetical populations with identical characteristics. This assumption remains invalid due to genetic and phenotype variability that makes statistical inferences misleading when applied to real populations. The combination of unique genetic makeups, variable gene expression, and diverse human behaviors creates complexity that makes perfectly controlled nutrition experiments impossible with current scientific methods. Then you have the institutional corruption web. Nutrition science operates within an institutional framework where methodological limitations combine with financial conflicts to produce unreliable guidance that millions follow daily. Public funding limitations force researchers to depend on corporate money, creating conflicts that severely influence perceived reliability and generate public doubts about scientific independence. This dependence creates feedback loops where dietary guidelines reinforce market interests rather than health outcomes. Commercial pressures shape which research questions get asked, how studies are designed, and whether unfavorable findings ever reach publication. The resulting system produces nutritional recommendations that shift frequently and sometimes contradict each other entirely. These changes reflect institutional pressures and statistical manipulation rather than genuine scientific advancement. Government dietary guidelines face criticism for political and commercial influence that compromises their scientific foundation. The agencies responsible for public health recommendations maintain partnerships that create obvious conflicts of interest. Finally, there's the public health consequences. Right? These combined factors create a field where scientific consensus remains elusive and findings frequently fail to replicate. The results is ongoing confusion about basic nutritional principles that affects both healthcare practitioners and the general public. Dietary recommendations lack solid empirical support, yet influence the eating habits of millions. This creates potential for widespread harm when guidelines promote foods or dietary patterns based on manipulated data rather than genuine evidence. Public trust in nutritional science continues declining as people observe contradictory recommendations and frequent guideline changes. This skepticism extends to other areas of medical research and public health policy. Healthcare practitioners struggle to provide evidence-based dietary guidance when the underlying research suffers from systematic bias and methodological impossibility. Many resort to personal opinion or commercial influence rather than scientific evidence. The institutional corruption and statistical manipulation underlying current nutritional guidance represents a fundamental threat to evidence-based medicine and public health decision-making. Understanding these limitations becomes essential for anyone seeking reliable information about diet and health. The current system cannot provide the definitive answers that both professionals and the public desperately need for making informed choices. There's a lot to cover in that part. And thanks for watching till the end. And if you made it this far. And once again, if you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the appropriate section. We are building a community here. I'm trying to answer your questions. So if there's something you want me to cover, let me know in the comments, and we'll try to do a video for you as soon as possible. All right? And as always, if you haven't done so, please think about liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing the video with a friend. It helps a great deal, and we thank you for that. And as always, please have a great day.